Well, about 2 months ago, my oldest son was at school. He's 5 years old, and he was at school. And 5-year-olds, they do some crazy stuff, and I don't actually know exactly what they do at school. But he came home that day with a massive cut on the top of his head, and I think another kid had chucked a block at him or something, and it hit him in the head. And so he came home, and he was complaining that his head hurt. It was open, it was blood and everything. It was a pretty good cut, and so. Of course, when I got home, my wife said, "Hey, Joel, you're going to have to clean this thing up, because of." And you got to understand, my oldest son, my two boys are quite different. My younger one is like he could have literally, I think, a broken leg, and he would not cry. Like the kid is just like rock solid tough. And Kason, my oldest son, he can whimper and whine about like minor things. He's just not as tough when it comes to those things. And so, of course, my wife was trying to clean out this wound, and he just did not want anything. Anybody ever try to clean out a kid's wound and they just like freak out like their world's coming to an end, right? And so we're trying to sit him down, and we're trying to clean out this gash in his head, and we're trying to work on it, and he's freaking out and crying and screaming. And so, just probably worst parent of the year moment. I understand that, okay? But, I think I got to this point where I was like, okay, whatever. If he doesn't want it cleaned, he's going to fight me on it. I'm not even going to clean the dumb thing, okay? He can suffer through it if it hurts that bad, and I know I'm not a good parent, whatever, okay? Email me later. But anyway, so I'm just like, whatever. So we tried our very best, and we did everything we could, and so we were done with it, right? Well, about a week later, my son, all of a sudden, he started, like, he would come into the living room, and he was doing this. He had his head turned like this, and he's walking like this up to us. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing? He's like, my neck hurts. I'm like, why does your neck hurt? He goes, I don't know, but I have a headache and my neck hurts. And so the only thing I could think about was, from his cut and whatever, but it was starting to heal up and everything. So I'm like, oh, all right, well, I think you're just being a little over-exaggerating. I actually we laughed about it. We thought it was funny. And so then about a day later at school, he's at school, and the teacher calls us and says, hey, there's something wrong, I think, with Kason. He's saying his neck hurts and his head hurts, and we're like, he's good. He's, toughen up, dude. He's all right. And so another day went by, and teacher calls us again, like, I think you might want to come get your son. He seems like something's wrong. And so we actually called the doctor, and we're like, hey, should we bring him in? And they actually said, they're like, he's probably okay, but, if you want to bring him in, you can. And so we ended up bringing him in, and again, worst parent of the year award. We found out that he actually had sepsis. Okay, now I don't know if you know what I just thought it was a cool word, but when I looked it up, like what it was, this is like a major infection in his body. And the doctor said if you would not have brought him in like that day or maybe the day after, there's likelihood like he would have been on, if you had brought him in a couple days later, he'd been on IVs. Literally can lead to death. This is a pretty serious thing. And so, they got him the antibiotics, they took care of the infection and everything like that. But it's amazing, really, when you think about it, what an infection can do in your own body if you don't treat it, if you don't take care of it. Just so we're on the same page, the medical definition of an infection is that it's the invasion and it's the multiplication of microorganisms such as bacteria, viruses, and parasites that are not normally present in the body. Now, I want you to pay attention to these two words. It's the invasion, but not only the invasion, but it's the multiplication of things that you do not want in your body. Over the next 3 weeks, I'm going to be talking and I'm going to be teaching on this idea of not only do I believe that you can be infected, and have infections in your body through disease or through, passing diseases back and forth. You know what that can cause. But what if the words that we speak in our everyday life have the power to infect those around you for either good or for bad? That the words that you speak have the ability to have an invasion, and not only an invasion, but a multiplication of negative effect in our own lives and in other people's lives, that your words, they actually have power to not only affect you and infect you, but to infect those around you as well. So over these next couple weeks, I'm going to be talking on topics that I actually think every one of you, every one of us, we all can relate to, because I think we all struggle with these things. In fact, I would say that this is a great series to invite somebody to, because I think I don't believe there's one person sitting here today, one person watching this online, listening to the podcast, who you would say, I don't struggle with this at all. In fact, Jesus said it this way about our words, as far as how our words have impact. He says this, that a good man, it says, brings good things out of the good that's stored up in his heart. And an evil man, he brings evil things out of the evil that is stored up in his heart. And then he says this, amazing. He says, for the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. In other words, this is what Jesus is saying. He says that if you've ever said something and then you said, oh, I didn't really mean that, Jesus would say, no, that's actually not true. That whatever's inside of your heart actually comes out of your mouth. And so whatever you choose to speak, and so you've had people in your life, or maybe you've even said something in your life where you said something or somebody said something to you, and they said, that's not really who I am. I did not mean those words. And Jesus would say this, actually, that's either the good or it's the evil that's inside your own heart. So if you're willing to go on a journey with me, I'm going to be talking about things that I think we struggle with in our society, in our worlds, like gossip. I'm going to be talking about things like lying. But before we get to that, to kind of introduce this week's topic, I want to take all of you back 4 weeks ago, okay? Now, if you don't remember 4 weeks ago, let me remind you what 4 weeks ago looked like, okay? Now, I don't know about you, but by a show of hands, all of our campuses, you can participate if you'd like, but by a show of hands, how many of you wanted to kick somebody in the face 4 weeks ago when you saw this, right? Okay, yeah, I was there, right? I mean, how many of you felt like life was just terrible when you saw snow on the ground? I mean, just curious, any of you like that? Like you enjoyed the... Okay, I don't like any of you raising your hands. You guys are weird, okay? I mean, I don't know about you, but many of us on April 17th, when the snow began to fall, you know, for a lot of us, we were doing this thing called complaining, right? And I'm not judging you because you want to know what I was doing? I was complaining about the snow. You know, again, I just preach it. I don't always live it, okay? I mean, just joking. But I found myself saying things like, you know, this isn't fair, or why in the world would it snow on April 17th? You know, I did not sign up for this, right? In fact, it reminded me a little bit like this weatherman right here.
It's going to be fine.
Good.
You know, it'll be fine.
All right.
Could be worse. Yeah. Has been worse. Well, because you guys are dragging me down. You guys keep... Well, every time I get done with the 7-day, you guys are like, oh, gosh, oh. Every time. Doesn't matter what time I come on. 4:30, 5:30, 6:30... And then you expect me to be chipper for 5 straight hours. It's miserable. I want you guys to say, wow, that's great news. It's going to be 60 on Friday. Well, I mean, what do you want me to do? Lie to you? I'll put 70 every day next time. God.
Thank you for your commitment.
Yeah. Thank you. Mr. Davis appreciates it. He knows when to bundle up.
Yep.
Here's some wind. Here's some temperature, 20s. Feels like 19 or feels like 70, I don't know. 47, partly cloudy, southwest breeze 10 to 15. Here's a 60. I don't know if that's good enough for you guys. Get excited. Maybe I'll disappoint you with the 7-day here in a few minutes.
Ooh.
Funny, but can we be honest? I mean, I think sometimes I think we get in these modes where we just like to complain. And let me just ask you this question. Think about this. What does complaining really do for you? I mean, really, did it change the weather? Did it make the weather better? Or if you're like me, it just made me look at the 10-day forecast a little bit more, like hoping that there would be a break or hoping that something good was coming, hoping and praying for a change. So today I want to talk about a problem I think we have in our society. It's called complaining. And here's the questions that we'll kind of walk through is, you know, is complaining wrong? I mean, I think there's some people who believe, you know, I don't actually think complaining is a bad thing, like if it's justified, or you would maybe ask this question, is it a sin to complain? Is there a right and a wrong way to complain? And I think these are great questions to ask. What does complaining actually do for you, and what does it do for me? Now, when I first think about this idea of complaining, the first place I go to in the Bible is the people, the Israelites in the Old Testament. These were God's chosen people. Now, if you know their story, these guys were in captivity. They were in slavery, and of course, as slaves, they complained quite often. I mean, you could imagine if you were being forced to work in rough conditions, you were a slave your entire life, I think it would lead to some complaining. But the amazing thing about this story is that God shows up in these people's lives, and God delivers the people, the Israelites, out of slavery and delivers them from Pharaoh's hands. He does amazing things like the 10 plagues, and he parts the Red Sea, and when they need food, he delivers actually bread from heaven, manna. Not only that, but he gives them water to drink from a rock. I mean, these incredible, incredible miracles take place in the Israelites' lives. And what do you think that they did in the midst of that? They chose to still complain. It's almost comical to me how they look like I looked almost 4 weeks ago, that this is them as they're out of slavery. They say this, was it because that there was no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? We were so happy when we were slaves. Like, okay, you're lying, all right? No, you weren't. But now, they says, you've brought us out of there. Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone? Let us serve the Egyptians. It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians and then die in the desert. They're saying it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to come out here in the desert and die. So these were people that were complaining. It sounds like many of us, and yet here is Moses' response to the Israelites. This is what he says. He says, you're actually not grumbling against us. In other words, you're not complaining to me as Moses, he says, but you're actually grumbling against the Lord. He says that, I know you think you're complaining to me as your leader. I think you think that this is justified because I am the one leading you, but he says, actually you're complaining against God. Imagine if every time that you complain, it wasn't against your circumstances. It wasn't actually about the traffic. It wasn't about another person. But what if in God's eyes, you were actually complaining against him? Perhaps that's maybe how he sees it. I kind of want to help you personalize this for just a minute. I want you just to ask yourself this question. What do you tend to complain about the most? I want you to think about that. In your own life, what are the things, or what is the thing that you tend to complain about the most? In fact, when all of you came in, you were handed a little handout, and on there's a spot where you can fill in the blanks. You don't have to do it if you don't want, but you can kind of follow along with the message, and there's a spot where you can write in there, what is the thing that you tend to complain about the most? And whether you write it down or think about it in your mind, I want you to think about, what is that thing for you in your life? Maybe it is the weather. You know, maybe you found yourself complaining that it was so cold, and then if you're like some people I heard recently, like when it got up to 80 or close to 80, you're going, man, it's so hot. And now we're complaining because it's too cold again, and you find yourself going back and forth in the weather. Maybe you find yourself complaining because you're not married, and you feel like life isn't fair, and you want to get married, and you find yourself always complaining. Maybe you are married. You're complaining about being married all the time, right? Maybe you find yourself complaining about money and how it's tight, or your house isn't all that you want it to be, or maybe it's about your boss, or maybe it's about a coworker. Maybe, come on, first world problems. How many of us complain all the time that the Wi-Fi is too slow, right? I had someone say that to me yesterday. Hey, the Wi-Fi in the church is just a little too slow for me. Like first world problems, right? Maybe you're complaining because there's nothing good on TV, or maybe it's slow drivers, or your school, or a teacher, or a coach. I don't know what it is for you. But I want you to think about and personalize this. What is the thing in your life that you tend to complain about the most? And I want to clarify something for you and for me. The problem is not the weather. The problem is not the traffic. The problem is not that Netflix hasn't come out with a new original that meets your expectations and your standards. That is not the problem. The problem is this, is that we have taken our eyes off the goodness of God, and we've placed our eyes dead center on ourselves. See, the problem is not that you're not married. The problem is not your spouse. The problem is not your kids. The problem is that when we take our eyes off the goodness of God, and we focus our eyes dead center on ourselves, and it leads to us complaining. And the question I would ask you today is, have you taken your eyes off of how amazing God is? Have you taken your eyes off of all the things that are great and amazing in your life, the blessings that you have in your life? There's a great story I want to use to illustrate this. It was written and actually about a guy by the name Paul, the Apostle Paul. Now, I think if there was a guy who probably had some reasons to complain, it would be Paul. Now, if you don't know his story, he actually was somebody who persecuted Christians on a regular basis. He actually murdered Christians. And at this time, his name was Saul, and he has this encounter with God, and it completely changes his perspective, and they change his name. He changes his name to Paul. And he really uses the rest of his life to serve God, to go after God. In fact, if you read any of the New Testament, he writes a majority of the New Testament. And after Paul is kind of, transferred into this new life and he decides, I want to go after God, I want to serve God, the number one thing on Paul's bucket list, the thing that he wanted to do more than anything else, was that he wanted to go to Rome and he wanted to be a preacher. His desire was, he felt, if he could go to Rome, if he could travel to Rome and be a preacher, he could really reach so many people, and then the gospel, this idea of Jesus coming to save us for our sins, could be reached to so many other people. But instead of going to Rome to be a preacher, he's actually arrested. He's put in prison. He's actually taken to Rome. So think about this. He wants to be a preacher in Rome, but he becomes a prisoner in Rome. He's locked away 24 hours a day. He's tied to a Roman guard. And I want you to grasp this for a moment. This guy served God. He went after God. He did everything that he should do. And all he wants to do is not take a fancy vacation to Rome. He's going, God, I want to go to Rome to serve you. I want to go to Rome to reach people. I want to preach how amazing you are to people. And now I'm a prisoner, not a preacher. But instead of maybe doing what a lot of us would do, complaining, instead of taking his eyes off the goodness of God and onto his circumstances, he writes this letter to the church in Philippi. And this is what he says in the book of Philippians. He says this. He says, I want you to do, what's that next word? All right, give me some energy. Do what? Do everything, he says, without complaining or arguing. So imagine, again, this is a guy chained to a Roman guard. He says, I want you to do everything without complaining or arguing, so that no one can criticize you. Live clean and innocent lives as children of God, shining like bright lights in a world full of crooked, perverse people. Paul, he says, as he's chained to a Roman guard, he says, I want you to do everything without complaining or arguing. Well, Joel, what about like when I'm in a bad situation? Here's Paul chained to a Roman guard, and he's saying, no, I want you to do everything. Why? I think there's a lot of actual great spiritual lessons and reasons why you shouldn't complain. We'll get to some of those, but let me give you a practical reason why you shouldn't complain. I understand in a group like this, there's some of you who are here today, and you'd say, Joel, I don't even buy into the whole God thing. I'm not even sure if I would say that this whole God thing is real. I don't even know if I really believe that I should, go after God and give my life to Him. Let me give you a practical reason why you should, even if you don't believe in God and believe in Jesus, why you should not complain. There's a doctor, his name is Travis Bradbury. He wrote a book, and it's titled Emotional Intelligence 2.0. And this doctor, he did some incredible research on the idea of complaining and being negative in your life. And this is what he says. He says that repeated complaining, get this, it hardwires your brain to do, guess what? Complain. That when you complain, and then you complain again, and then you complain again, he says what you're doing is you are actually hardwiring your brain, whether you know it or not, to look at circumstances in a negative light, to actually complain more. In other words, the more negative that you are, the more that you begin to complain, and your brain will naturally begin to complain even when you don't want it to. Some of you, these days, you feel like you are so negative. In fact, you would say to yourself, why do I feel like I'm always negative? Or you know somebody who you would say, why? No, it does not matter what I do. They think it is the worst thing in the world. Here's why. He's saying, according to this research, the more that you tend to complain, that person, you, me, it doesn't matter who it is, you are hardwiring your brain to complain more. And here's what he says. He says, when this happens, you enter into what they call a confirmation bias. In other words, you expect something to be bad, therefore, you get what you expect. Let me tell you where I see this often, in churches. Now, I've talked to a lot of people who maybe they would say they don't like Thornapple Valley Church, or they don't like TBC, or even church in general. Some of you know people like that. You would say, I'm not a big fan of just the church in general. And sometimes it's funny, I'll have conversations with people, and they'll say, hey, what do you do for a living? And I'll tell them what I do. And they say, well, what church do you work at? And I'll say, Thornapple Valley Church. And it's always kind of fun for me, because if Thornapple Valley Church has impacted them in a positive light, they'll be, oh, yeah, I love that church. I love what they do. But then there's this other group of people. It's amazing to me, and it's comical, and I enjoy it, actually, is I'll say, yeah, I work at Thornapple Valley Church, and they'll go, oh, yeah, that church. right? And it's always fascinating because I can see it in them, and I'll actually say, well, like, what do you have, like something about the church, or have you been there? And they'll go, no, I've never been there. So I can tell there's something negative there. You don't like it. Is there a reason why you don't like it? And they'll be like, no, it's just not a good church, or they don't want to really offend me or anything, but they have this viewpoint. Sometimes it's that church, a big church, is bad, right? Or I've actually had people say this: it's video teaching. Don't you guys do like video teaching at some of your campuses? And I'm like, yeah, that's what we do. We broadcast video teaching at our campuses, and they'll say, oh, that's bad. That's bad, right? Some of you actually here, broadcast campus here in Hastings, you actually would say you would never go to a campus and watch video. But the amazing thing is this, is that I watch all of you, and I look out at all of you. Most of you are actually watching me on the screens. It's fascinating to me. Someone came up to me last night and said, you're right. He's like, I would say I hate video teaching, but I find myself every weekend when I'm watching you, I'm actually looking over at the screen, watching up there, right? See, why? Because sometimes we hardwire our brain to think something is bad before we've actually ever experienced it. Now, it doesn't mean you can't have opinions, but this happens all the time. This is a reality because sometimes we have this negative view. Some of you have friends that you've tried to invite over and over and over again to church, and they refuse to come because they have a negative viewpoint of what church actually is. Maybe they've been wounded by a church. And some of you, you're here today, come on, and you aren't sure about church in general because of your past, because you actually have been wounded by one. And let me just say, those feelings, those emotions, they're real. I'm not putting them down, but you know this is true because of all the negative that you've experienced from church. You have hardwired your brain to think that maybe certain churches or this church or another church is bad. You find yourself turned off from church. So people have decided, maybe you decided, other people, that they don't like something before they even walk in the door. And this doesn't just happen in churches, it happens in relationships. You watch somebody who has been so wounded by somebody in a relationship, in a marriage, and it ends in divorce, right? And you watch them as they go through life and they say things like this: all men are evil. Or all women, I would never get married again. And all they want to do is they want to hurt you and they want to tear you down. Some of you, you're trying to date somebody, right, who has been through a relationship and they've been broken and hurt and wounded. And you're like, man, I brought them flowers and they threw flowers at me and called me a jerk. Like, don't women like flowers, right? And you're like, why is it that I cannot get through to them? Why? Because they've hardwired their brain, according to this doctor, to think that every relationship is going to end like the one that they previously had. That's why we shouldn't complain. Because when you complain, you hardwire your brain to think that things are negative before you've even experienced them in your life. And this was the very problem with the Israelites. They complained in captivity, and therefore, which led to them complaining in freedom, because their negative mindset trained them to be even more negative, which is incredibly dangerous. And I don't know about you. I don't want to go through my life only seeing the bad. There's enough bad in the world. I don't want to walk around complaining all the time about everything that is negative, and I have to fight this in my life. You have to fight this in your life. I want to train my mind to find the good, and this is exactly what Paul was saying. He's saying, don't complain. In fact, I would give you two thoughts. You can write these down if you want when it comes to your circumstances and how to control not complaining. And I would say this, that if you can change your circumstances, then do something about it. If there's something going on in your life that you can actually change, then I would challenge you to actually do something about it. If you have a negative circumstance, something that's unpleasant, something that isn't right, and you can do something, then do something. In other words, I'm saying this: I don't think we should go through life pretending that everything in life is amazing, everything is roses, everything is great. It's not sin to notice bad in the world. When it boils into sin is when we complain and we do nothing about it. There's an Old Testament character, his name was Nehemiah. In fact, a little homework for you. I'd challenge you to read the book of Nehemiah this week. It's a book in the Old Testament, great story. And this guy, he had a passion for Jerusalem. And he realized that the walls of Jerusalem had been torn down. And he was very upset about this because he had a passion for this city. He loved this city. And what you find in his story is that he didn't complain about it. He didn't whine about it. He didn't say, oh my gosh, why doesn't somebody do something to fix this? He was bothered. And so he did something about it. He went and he rebuilt the walls himself. See, if there's something that you dislike, if there's something in your life that gives you a righteous dissatisfaction, I would encourage you, don't complain about it. Don't put comments on Facebook about it. Don't tweet about it. Bring your A game and actually fix the problem. Some of you, come on, you're going to love this. Some of you spend more time Facebooking than fixing. Come on. In fact, go back and look at your history in Facebook or on Twitter or whatever kind of thing you use, and look at your past 5 or 10 posts. How many of them were positive? And how many of them were things that you were complaining about? And get this, you sat on your rear end and you wrote your words out and told everybody how bad your mother-in-law was, told everybody how bad this relationship was. Say, I'm not going to name any names, but in case you da-da-da-da-da, but yet you did nothing about the problem. That was really good preaching. You guys didn't like it, okay? But it was. See, but that's what we love to do, is we love to complain about people. We want to complain about circumstances. We want to complain about organizations. We want to complain about churches. We want to complain about that person or this person. We want to complain about our boss. But we don't want to do anything about it. And I would say this, as if you can actually change your circumstances, instead of posting about it, do something about it. Solve the issue. Solve the problem. So in the beginning, you wrote down, what is it in your own life that you tend to complain about the most? I would just ask you, can you do something about that situation? Can you fix it? Can you change your circumstances? Then I would encourage you to step it up and do something about it. For some of you, you'd say, I can't change it. So I would say this, that if you can't change your circumstances, then you have to begin to change your perspective on life. Again, I would say for a lot of us, we've taken our eyes off the goodness of God and we focus our eyes on something that really doesn't mean all that much. And if you can't change your circumstances, which some of you would say, Joel, I can't change my circumstances. But I would say that you can change your perspective. You can refocus your eyes on the amazing goodness of God. Take a moment and write down 10 things that you're thankful for. I guarantee you can come up with it. You can refocus. You can change what you say about it. You can change how you think about it. You can change what you choose to see. You know, Paul, he did this. So not only did he just say, you know, hey, guys, you shouldn't whine, complain about anything. You know, do everything in your life without complaining or arguing. Do everything that you can. Instead of just saying that, you know, he actually lived this thing out. In fact, this is what he says later in that letter. He just says these 3 words, and we'll get to the rest, but I think we just got to stop here. He just says, but even if. See, some of you, these are the words that you need to say in your life, but even if. God, even if my job doesn't change, I'll choose to change my perspective. God, even if my marriage doesn't seem like there's any hope in the midst of that, I will change my perspective. God, even if it feels like nobody loves me and I'm not cared about, even if. And Paul here, he's just saying these 3 valuable words. He's saying, even if everything in life does not change, I will choose to celebrate you. I will choose to refocus my eyes on God. And some of you, all you came to church today for was this, is that you cannot change your circumstances. You cannot change the person who has wounded you in your life. You cannot change your health and the issues that you're going through. But you know what you can change? Your perspective. You can change how you think about it. You can change the words that come out of your mouth. You can change your viewpoint. And this is exactly what Paul did. He says this, he says, but even if I am being poured out like a drink offering on the sacrifice and service coming from your faith, he says, I am glad and I rejoice with all of you. So you too to be glad and rejoice with me. Now, Paul, he says something pretty amazing here. He uses this phrase. He says, even if I'm being poured out like a drink offering. Now, what does that mean? Well, the Greek word translated here is the word spendo, which means to spend it all. It's actually a very powerful word, and the people who would have heard this language when he was writing this, they would have understood this, and what it really came down to was a sacrifice that was made on an altar. And so what would happen in their time is they would do a burnt offering, a sacrifice. And so what they would do is they would bring a lamb or they would bring a goat and they would sacrifice it on an altar. And this was their sacrifice to God for the forgiveness of sins. And then when they got done with that, they would do this thing called a drink offering. And what they would do is they would take their most expensive liquid. A lot of times this was wine, or oftentimes it could be honey, because honey was a very, delicacy at that time. You couldn't come by it very often. And what they would do with this drink offering is they would take it, and you can imagine what would happen on a burnt offering as they poured it out. Some of you are going to tell people at TBC we have sorcery now, and it's going to be all like... But what Paul is saying here is he's saying, even if I'm being poured out like a drink offering, even if it feels like my life is wasting away, even if it feels like my cup is empty, he says, I will still choose to serve you. Some of you these days in your life, you feel just like Paul does. You would say that this is my life, Joel, and I feel like it's just being wasted away. I feel like it's completely being wasted away in my life. My marriage is falling apart. My relationships are falling apart. My job I can't stand. My boss I can't stand. And what Paul is saying is even if you feel like you're being wasted away, even if you feel like everything is being poured out, even if you feel like your cup is empty, he says you can still choose to change your perspective of life. To not focus on all the negative, which hardwires your brain to think about the negative. That's why Paul later, he says this. He says, in Romans chapter 12, he says, I want you to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God, holy and acceptable to God. And he says this, that this is your spiritual act of worship. In other words, worship isn't just singing songs and lifting our hands to God. Worship, true worship to God, is daily offering your life to him, pouring out everything, even chained to a Roman guard, even when you lose your job, even when your spouse might leave you, even when your relationships are falling apart, even when school seems miserable to you, even when your parents don't believe in you. It says, even if, I will choose to worship you. Some of you these days, you feel like you're being poured out like a drink offering. You would say, Joel, my cup is so empty. And you find yourself complaining about your circumstances over and over and over again. And you cannot change your circumstances. Some of you this weekend, Mother's Day weekend, is a rough weekend for you because of your circumstances, whatever they might be. And I'm not saying that you should make light of it. I'm not saying that it's not valuable. I'm not saying it's not hurtful. And you can't change your circumstances, but I believe you can refocus your eyes, and it might have to be a daily thing. It might have to be an hourly thing. You can refocus your eyes on the goodness of God. Even if I cannot change my circumstances, I will choose to change my perspective. Why? Because I know that God works all things together for his good. And I don't know who this is going to speak to, but if that's you, if you're in a place that you don't like, can I encourage you today that God still has an incredible plan for your life, that God has a purpose for you. It may not be what you would choose right now. It may not be exactly what you would want. And the good news is this, is that God can still use you. Paul was chained to a Roman guard, and I would ask you this, what are you chained to these days? What do you feel tied down to these days? Maybe it is a relationship. Maybe it's a job situation or a financial problem or a health issue. Let me just say to you, if you can do something about it, then I would encourage you to do something about it. If you can bring your A game, bring your A game. If you can get counseling, get counseling. If you can change your perspective, then change it. If you can get wisdom, whatever you can do, do it. But if you can't change your circumstances, then change your perspective in life. That we have so much to be thankful for. We have so much good in life. So how do you do that? I want to give you just two quick thoughts on this. Number one, I would say if you're going to change your perspective, you're going to stop complaining all the time, you actually have to watch who you spend time with. You have to watch who you spend time with. See, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I think you all know that this is true, but when you spend time with people who are always negative, guess what it's doing? You're hardwiring your brain to be more negative. Some of you, you know exactly what this means because you have a friend or an ex-friend, okay, who you would say when you were around them, you found yourselves always being negative. Well, the economy, well, the government, well, this thing, well, that thing. And you found yourself always being negative. Why? Because when you hang out with negative people, you will naturally become negative. Teenagers, I've said this for years. Show me your friends, and I'll show you your future. You show me who your friends are, and I'll tell you exactly what your future is going to look like. In other words, if you choose to hang out with losers, guess what you're going to become? A loser. You're going to hang out with people who do drugs, guess what you're probably going to end up doing? Drugs. You hang out with people who vape all the time, guess what you're going to do? You're going to start vaping. You hang out with people who complain all the time, guess what you're going to start doing? Complaining. And parents, adults, the same for us. See, we love to preach this to our kids. That person over there, they're not a good influence for you. You shouldn't be hanging out with them. When you get around them, your attitude changes. So does yours. I find this in my own life. When I'm around people who always tend to be negative, guess what I start doing? I start becoming negative. I start complaining. Folks, can I just say this is why church matters? That when you come to a local church, I'm not just saying TBC, but when you gather together with other believers who are going in the same direction as you, they're not perfect, they don't have it all figured out, but when you get together with other people in church, or you are a part of a life group, or you serve together, you go in the same direction, it changes your perspective on life. Do you realize that this summer, okay, we're entering into getting close to summer, all across the United States, numbers in churches will plummet. In fact, this is kind of like the funny joke that in the summer, every church goes, oh my gosh, we're going to close down. Like, oh my gosh, like no one's coming anymore. No, just everybody has gone away on vacation. They're doing these things, doing that thing. And I'm not saying vacation is bad. I'm not saying that these things are bad. But can I just challenge you? Our society says that church is optional. Our society says that there's everything better than coming to church, that do church when you're around or be a part of it when you can. And I want to just challenge you as a church family this summer. Be a family who's a part of a local church. And maybe for some of you, you go away for the summer, then find a church around you to go to. Some of you, you go camping every summer. That's why, this summer we're going to again do Monday nights in Middleville. Starting the Monday after Memorial Day, you can actually come every Monday night, 7 p.m. at our Middleville location. You can go there, be a part of it. It's going to be a normal weekend service because church matters. Maybe you can join our online community. And so we have online services all throughout the week, on the weekend, if you are going to miss. But again, there's something about gathering together with other people. Be with people who lift you up. So who are you spending time with? Who are the people that you're hanging around with the most? Young people, adults, it doesn't matter. You have to watch who you spend time with. The second thing I would just say is this, is that if you want to stop complaining, you have to learn to see the good and actually celebrate the good in other things. You have to learn to find what is the goodness. I talked about it earlier, how oftentimes what we do is we take our eyes off of the goodness of God and we place our eyes dead center on ourselves and our circumstances. And if you want to put your eyes back on the goodness of God, you have to learn what it is that you need to celebrate in your life. Do you realize that last weekend we asked you guys if you wanted to be a part of our Delton building. And so, just starting in June, our hope is that we'll begin to break ground at our new location in Delton. Very exciting what God's doing there. And so we asked you as a church family, hey, would you be willing to pray about this? Would you be willing to give of your time and your energy and your talents to help us in this building? Because this is going to be done by mainly volunteers. And do you realize last weekend, 389 of you signed up to help? Yeah, you should celebrate that. Yeah. I mean, that's something that we can celebrate, right? And sometimes what we do is we go through life and we go, oh my gosh, we have all these things to do, instead of stopping and pausing and saying, 389 of you said, hey, I'm willing to get on board with this. In fact, on the other side of your fill in the blank, there's a spot there. If you weren't here last weekend, you want to be a part of the Delton building, you can do that. You can fill that thing out. Your way out, there's buckets, you can drop it in. But sometimes I think what we have to do is we have to stop and say, what are the things that we need to celebrate these days? Let me just tell you a dirty little secret about churches. Sometimes churches, we're terrible at this. And sometimes churches are really bad, and I'm talking about leadership in churches, really bad at celebrating what God is doing, get this, in other churches, right? And so oftentimes what we view other churches is we complain about them, or we think about, oh, that church, they do it that way. And again, we've been at the brunt of a lot of this with other churches thinking we're not good at, but guess what? Sometimes it's easy for us as well to complain, or maybe you found yourself doing this about other churches instead of seeing the good in other churches. In fact, many of you might know there's a church in the Caledonia area called Journey Church. And they're actually on their way to renovating a church that actually shut down on kind of as you're leaving the Hastings campus going towards Middleville. There's a church right there. They're going to have a Middleville location. And pretty exciting stuff what they're doing. They're building out there. And I've actually had people from TBC come to me and say, what do you think about that? Like, what do you mean, what do I think about that? They're kind of coming into our territory. No joke. I've literally had people like, does that bother you? And I go, no, why would that bother me? Like, it's a church. They're trying to reach people, right? And sometimes, again, though, our initial reaction is that we're competition. Instead of celebrating what God is doing, that they're reaching people, they're doing something incredible. In fact, this past week, I got to tell you that this is the heart, Jeff, our lead pastor, and myself, that we don't want to look at other churches and say, well, we don't like what they're doing. We should be celebrating what other churches are doing. In fact, this past week, we got to go out there and we got to meet with them. And I thought you'd like this video as we got a chance to check out their new building.
Well, hey, everybody. Joel and I are here at the new Middleville campus of Journey Church, which is located in Caledonia. And we're here with John Allen, who's the lead pastor, and this is Derek Schultz, who's going to be the campus pastor here at this place. Very excited. Guys, we've been watching this go up. By the way, it's located south of Middleville on M37. Many of you have probably seen it going up. Very exciting. And we're so excited that we wanted to get a tour. Would you guys be willing to show us around?
Yeah, absolutely. Love to. Let's do it.
Hey, well, thanks, guys, so much for taking us on a tour. So, John, why don't you tell us a little bit, what's your guys' hope and dream for this campus?
Yeah, a couple of years ago, we kind of found ourselves at this place where we're just asking, hey, God, what do you have next for us? And really just sensed his invitation to come to Middleville and respond a little bit to Middleville's growth and kind of a revitalization that's happening here, and just say, man, what if we could be one of a group of people offering life to people in Middleville? What if we could just be one of lots of different groups like you guys just saying, hey, how can we share Jesus and bring life to people in Middleville and people coming to Middleville and even the surrounding communities? So that's really kind of been the driving desire of our heart, to just say, how do we bring life and come alongside and be with some people like you guys who are also doing that.
And Derek, how can we as a church, Thornton Valley Church, how can we be praying for you guys as you guys are going through this process? I know a lot is happening. How can we pray for you guys?
Yeah, no, great question, and so value the prayers on the front side. Two different ways that I see it, and one is, in this season of trying to get the building done, we're looking at timelines, and things are always moving, and it's really easy to get locked in on the building versus the mission. Is keeping that energy there, focused on the mission, not so much the building. And the other side of that is certainly just continued favor in the community. As much as TVC has just been a blessing and a gift to the communities around us, to have favor with those people. So those are two areas that I would say, man, we would just so value the prayers of TVC.
Yeah, I think one of the things we need to do more, I'm talking about it, is the idea of celebrating. Celebrating the good when you see it. And I think sometimes we miss this in our own lives, but I also think we miss it in churches. And I think sometimes we have this assumption or this view of other churches as it's competition, when really, when you think about it, the mission is the same. And we're trying to reach people. We're trying to change people's lives. So I just want you guys to know on our behalf that we are for you. We're so excited for what God's doing at Journey. You guys are reaching so many people at the Caledonia location, and you're going to continue to do it here. And so we just wanted to say to you guys, we are on your team, and we're excited for what God's going to do here, and we'll be praying for you guys and just really thrilled. So,
Yeah, thanks for that.
You're a little too Catholic for us, but we're thrilled with it. So, guys, we're in the process of building ourselves. We hope to break ground very soon in Delton, and we know what it costs both energy-wise and monetarily, and so we wanted to give you a check for $10,000 to make a difference in the work here in Middleville. And I know this building is not cheap, and so we just want to say we're with you.
Pretty amazing. I think we need to celebrate more often what God's doing. Whether because of this, maybe some of you go to Journey Church, I would say awesome. As long as you're going to church, that's what matters. Connecting more people with God. And sometimes I think we need to see the good in life, and we need to celebrate the good instead of always looking at the negative. Even if. What is your even if moment for you in your life? Because in the midst of even that moment that you feel like you're being wasted away or you're feeling like you're being poured out, God is still good. There is still good, and we can choose to celebrate the good. Even if my greatest prayer is never answered, even if I never get out of this situation, I will still choose to celebrate and praise God because He never leaves me. He is for me. So what is that moment for you? What is the even if moment for you? And I would just challenge you maybe to write that down, and this week as you go through your week, every time you find yourself complaining about that, every time you find yourself thinking negative thoughts about that, to change your perspective, to celebrate something that's happening in life and see the good in life. Maybe for some of you today, you've realized that God is so good, but you've never actually chosen to follow him. You've never actually chosen to step across that line. I would love to invite you to take that step today. In fact, would you do me a favor? Would you just bow your heads and close your eyes, just for the sake of everybody around you? And I don't know if that's you and you're here today and you would say, Joel, I've never given my life to Christ. I've never surrendered everything to him. Or maybe you're here and you would say, Joel, there was a point in my life where I did give my life to Christ, but I've wandered away. I'm not following him any longer. I've really walked away from how amazing he is. You know, the Bible is very clear. It tells us that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. We've all missed the mark. And it also says that for the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord. That if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, if you believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, he says that you will be saved. And so this is something that I can't pray for you, I can't do for you, but if that's you, if you'd say, I want to make a decision today to follow Christ for the first time, or I want to rededicate my life, all you need to do is just to go to God right now and in your own words, in the quietness of your heart, and just say something like this: God, I know that I'm a sinner. And just say, God, right now I'm asking that you would forgive me of my sins, that you would come into my life. Maybe you just want to say, God, I want to serve you, I want to go after you. Maybe you want to say, God, I want to rededicate my life to you. I want to really follow you, Jesus. And I'm surrendering my entire life to you. And Jesus, we just thank you so much for your amazing goodness. We thank you for your amazing grace. God, we thank you that in the midst of whatever it is we're facing, in our even if moments, even if we feel like we're being poured out, even if we feel like we're being wasted away, there's so much good to celebrate. God, one of the things I want to celebrate is your amazing goodness for all the moms who are represented here today. God, the goodness for the people who have made decisions to follow you, to go after you. And as a church, we say, yay, God, we celebrate those decisions, and we say, you are good.